So you want to have fun, do you? Well, then you've come to the right place. Fun, however, is subjective, and what's fun for one may not be fun for another. So let's talk about how I think you can have more fun in Magic's finest format. For starters, you should add to the game, don't take. For most of us, fun in Commander means spending time with friends and creating epic or silly moments that can't be replicated in other Magic formats. If this is the goal, then a common mistake I see people making is playing cards that actively stop others from creating those moments or playing the game at all. An example I'll use that takes a lot and adds very little is playing too many generic board wipes. Resetting the game, especially a hard reset like Farewell, doesn't add anything to the game or progress the game state in any real way. It's at its core a selfish play that takes from the group and serves the individual, or the pursuit of winning rather than fun. Beyond board wipes, you can apply this thinking to stacks or any similar cards or themes that stop your pod from playing Magic. Instead, why not use those slots in your deck for something interesting that can help to create the highs that the table is looking for? This also extends beyond the cards to the energy you bring to the game, and you should ask yourself whether you're giving to the game and enhancing the experience of those around you, or simply taking. Given I'm telling you not to run boring or crappy board wipes, what removal should you run? Because we certainly need ways to deal with Voja. I'm a huge fan of thematic removal, one sided board wipes, or wipes that you can capitalize on and progress the game state. These are much more interesting, should synergize with your deck, and create situations that are far more advantageous for you. Not to mention being far more interesting for the table, which is a nice distraction or consolation prize when you just blew up all their stuff and are about to end their career. For the final point on removal, you should both literally and figuratively give up control. Literally, playing a control deck aims to take more than it gives to the table. That's great in a two-player game when you're focused on winning, but far less great in a four-player social one. That doesn't mean you can't play controlling decks at all, but actively think about how your deck is progressing the game in interesting ways that doesn't involve you grinding the pot and their will to play Magic with you into the ground. Figuratively, trying to control the outcome of a game creates an expectation that the game now has to live up to. Happiness is expectations less reality. So having less of an expectation about what exactly the game needs to be and going with the flow more will make you far happier. Choose to just experience the game and find the fun in that experience rather than the outcome. If Commander is a place where we want to make cool pieces of cardboard kiss, do we really want to get in the way of romance? Speaking of romance, most of you watching this aren't subbed. I'm new to making Magic content, and this is a new channel. So if you're enjoying this, I'd love it if you can get romantic with the sub and like buttons, as well as the comments section. That way you'll see more of me, and others will too. Commander is Magic's social format. Part of the fun comes from the cards, but critically, unlike the other formats, the larger portion of fun comes from the people. If we sit down and passively play our cards, and aren't engaged in fun conversation around the game, we're making a choice to leave the majority of the fun on the table. I'm not suggesting that we suddenly all become an extroverted life of the party, but it is worth thinking about what you're adding to the game, and in our own way, try to communicate more during our games in a way that aims to create more fun. I'd suggest thinking about the past games that you've played and identifying the moments that were the most fun for the table. Think about the communication around those moments and how you can try to recreate that in the future. Speaking of the future, don't try to win your next Commander game. It's crazy, I know, but stick with me here for a minute. If we think about the games that we've played and the craziest or most enjoyable moments, how many of them came as the result of someone winning? I'd argue very few. Winning is almost always anticlimactic because the moment that someone demonstrates how they can win, everyone shrugs and starts packing up their cards. It's the tension created by politics, swing plays, and out of nowhere moments that are the memorable bit, not the moment that everyone starts picking up their cards. Wins are typically memorable if they're directly related to this hijinks. So instead, I suggest not winning. Or more specifically, not having the goal of the game be to win. If we want to have a goal coming into the game, I'd suggest that the goal be trying to orchestrate some of these peaks or tension moments instead. which is why I think you should pick more fights in Commander. Now, I obviously don't mean physically, that would be cringe. But instead of focusing on being a methodical Commander machine and making only optimal plays, throw caution to the wind and cause some mischief. Making plays that don't make the most logical sense will often catch people completely unawares and create moments and dynamics that no one would have expected. Someone in my playgroup once countered my turn 2-3 visits with a swan song. The ramp wasn't critical for me, and that counter was important protection for them later, so the sheer randomness and absurdity caused the entire table to erupt in laughter. It became an in-joke in our playgroup that we now reference regularly, and it turned a fairly bland game into a moment that lived on far longer than it had any right to. So what I'm saying is that mischief is good, but chaos is very bad. At some point, many of us will have the idea that randomness in Commander is fun, and add cards to our decks or build decks that aim to create chaos with little other goal than the chaos itself. Used sparingly, these cards can create fun, memorable moments. But the problem is that they usually result in games where no one's deck is doing what they want, and where the game gets very drawn out. A game where no one is doing the thing, and no one has any clear path to progress around the game, and where you're likely sitting there for over 2 hours, is a game that is really fun for anyone. This is one of many deck building crimes against fun that are committed, which is why you should build better decks that focus on fun. I've got a whole video on this topic, which you should go and watch. It's my most watched video. But if I had to condense it in the context of fun, I'd say build better decks that are interesting and fun as your primary goals. People overvalue strength in deck building, and it can actively harm fun if all your decks are too strong for your playgroup. Don't get me wrong, decks can be strong, and they can be known commanders. But if your deck is doing exactly the same thing as all the other decks with the same commander, then by default, people will have had that experience before, and there is a lot less chance to produce plays or moments that are new and exciting. Another way you can increase the chances of exciting moments is to have different decks for different occasions. Whether it's because you're a new player who only has one deck, or you've given yourself a label and you only have 5 decks that do the same thing, not having a few decks that fulfill different roles in a pod, or create different experiences for you and the table, is hurting your ability to have fun. I made a similar point in my video about building decks that are fun to lose to, but I think Commander is at its best when it's a bit like a good Dungeons & Dragons session. It's an adventure that we share with other people, and it's the interesting things that happen along the way that are the important bit, rather than finishing or winning the adventure itself. Much the same way as a party works better when you have varied characters and classes that work well together, a Commander game works best when you have different decks that complement each other. Having a deck that can match the freak of the table you're sitting at, and talking briefly about how your decks will or won't work together, will help you build amazing games, and avoid those horrid ones where someone's deck is just an expensive paperweight. Last, but definitely not least, get your competitive needs met somewhere else. No matter how social or chill we are, we're all at least a tiny bit competitive. And one of the best things that you can do to increase your fun in Commander is getting this fightiness out somewhere else. Whether that's other competitive Magic formats like Standard or Modern, or something completely different like Valorant or Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Have another area in your life where you can and should be competitive. It allows you to enjoy what Commander is supposed to be about, social fun, much more easily. I think this is something that is especially important for the many new players that have been introduced to Magic in the last few years directly because of Commander. The lack of having played lots of competitive Magic means players tend to want to win in Commander a little bit too much. I think it's worth the reminder that Commander started as a social, fun outlet to act as an escape from the hardcore competitive play, and at its best, that's exactly what it is. I can't say it better than the one and only Sheldon Menery, who said philosophically, Commander was always intended to be a break from competitive Magic. I hope you found this useful and interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to have more fun in Commander in the comments. Thanks for watching.